Like, he's one of those players that you can just sit there. You don't need a drink, you don't need to eat, you can sit there all night and watch him.
He's able to really marshal, the energy of a tune, right? He can really build solos like almost nobody else that plays, right? Like he just builds and builds and builds.
Most people are doing blues. They'll play it, they'll do it. He is the blues.
There's some who can play with mere flash, and some can play with panache. But the one who'll release the sweet soul of the beast is the one who flies up from the ash.
St. John's, Newfoundland, and I got my first guitar when I was 9. And the deal was, you can have this for Christmas, and if you learn to play 5 songs by your birthday, you can have the amplifier to go with it. And I did. I learned 5 songs. I learned 6 songs. Yeah, well, I kind of knew I was going to do it for a living, but I really didn't play in a bar, per se, till I guess I was about 17, lying about my age, telling people I was 19, so that I wouldn't have to get a letter from my mother. There was always a fairly thriving blues scene, but I didn't really find out about that until I was about 17 or 18 years old. First time I ever heard, Robert Johnson, Muddy Waters, Howlin' Wolf, I guess, when I was about 15. And I didn't even know what it was called. I didn't even know it was called blues. It sounded like slowed down rock and roll to me. But then on one Muddy Waters track, I heard him playing slide guitar, and that sound was... that just haunted me.
I've seen him play some slide stuff. It's just like, it was a Saturday afternoon at Barely's, and he played this slide solo, and it was just like, it was one of the nicest things I ever heard. And like Roger's like quick to say, well, no, I got that off a record, and it's like, who, I could sit there with that record for 2 years and never be able to play that. That's not just any old talent. That's heavy stuff.
So it's a gradual thing. You go from copping solos to and then you progress through taking bits and pieces and putting them together, and then you add in your own. Eventually you're not thinking about it anymore. The mechanical part of it's there, and you're letting this do it's your heart.
He's lived it. He has a lot of life experience, and he is such a beautiful musician that the experiences he has come right out into his guitar. There's no There's no feeling of mediation there. They just pour right out. It's that quality of musicianship that is just touches people, you know, when you have that honesty and when you have that ability to tell a story so beautifully and accurately and with the economy of words or the economy of notes. You know, John Ford, who was a great cinematographer, would say there's only one right place to put a camera. There might be a million places you can put it. There's only one right place. It's the same thing about notes, you know. There's a million notes you can play, but which ones are you going to choose? And Roger just picks the right notes all the time.
Look at their faces, and as a photographer, you look at where they are. They're in some other place when they're playing. Well, I got into photography a few years ago, and I'm totally self-taught, but I love shooting live musicians. Roger is one of those people that I've been shooting over the last few years. What you get out of the still is a sense, a story. When he plays by himself and he plays one of those southern Texas or Mexico songs, I mean, I just see, you know, sagebrush and cow, you know, those old longhorn steers in the fields of Texas and those big red cliffs in the background, and it's just very visual stuff. With the band, it turns really visual at some point in the evening, and it just carries on from there into a creative kind of trio where it's not just Roger and two guys, it's three people playing very intricate stuff together, and they're very tight.
The first time I played with Rog, I think it was at Bearley's. The night was a gift. I mean, everything fell into place right from the beginning. Our paths had crossed, just the blues scene isn't that large. And initially, Fish was playing bass when Rog first started up.
I started playing with Dog McKay and Fish Fancy. And then one weekend, they couldn't make it.
Rog gave me a call, and I've been playing with him ever since.
Steve and I go back almost 30 years.
I met Roger in St. John's, Newfoundland in the beginning of the 80s. There was a lot of house parties going on then, and I think I met him at a party and found out that we had something in common.
And it turns out Steve was living in the house I grew up in. We had moved when I was about 11 or 12 years old, and this is where they were renting. It was like, you know, my old family home. We started jamming together then.
I left St. John's. I don't know how many years later, I noticed he was playing at a bar in Halifax.
And one Saturday afternoon, Steve walked in through the door.
Somehow or other, I ended up in his band, and I've been in his band ever since.
I've had both of those boys with me now for 8 or 9 years. And they're the best rhythm section I've ever had to work with.
It's a consensus. It's something that everyone is in together. If something is not happening, it ain't gonna happen.
As a drummer, all I really have to do is concentrate on the groove that we're playing, and they make the rest of it really easy. Roger's just that kind of player. You just play a beat, play a good groove, and basically he does all the rest.
There is nothing in the world that I know of that is as good as playing with a bunch of other people. I mean, there's a feeling among you when you're playing together that is unlike anything else. And you see that camaraderie with people who play on stage because in some way they're kind of making love to each other.
You know, you certainly got to have the trust of the people that you're playing with, you know, and sort of surround yourself with the right people. And, you know, certainly Rod has got just a dynamite little unit there with Stephen Morrow. I always kind of think of music a little bit as a conversation, you know, and some people have a lot to say. Some people can speak really interestingly. Some people have great stories, and he's sort of all those things. He's someone you could talk to all night long. And it's kind of like that playing guitar with him. One of the things that I really have learned a lot from him is he's so great at playing in a trio context, and part of it is his ability to just leave space in the right parts of the tunes, leave space in the rhythm, leave space in the solos. It creates so much more emotional intensity and makes stuff a lot tastier.
He has that other side, which is his singing voice. I mean, his guitar playing is brilliant, but his singing voice, he has an amazing range.
When I started playing blues in the clubs and stuff, I was 18 years old. And if you're 18 years old, you just don't sound right when you try and sing blues. You can't, it's very, very hard to be convincing. I think the male voice sounds better as it gets older, at least for singing blues.
The thing with blues, you're not going to start out like 20 years old and be a friggin' star. You don't hit your stride till you're like 40 or 50.
I've sung with Roger since I've come to Halifax. He's just a great singer, and he's got a great ear. And it makes me nervous, frankly.
Sometimes he's singing and all of a sudden he pops up an octave.
There's a lot of tunes I'd love to be doing, but there's no way. I can't sing them. You know, when he was popular and just after he died and stuff, 90% of the requests you get would be for Stevie Ray. But unfortunately, there's a lot of his material where, his voice was pitched maybe 2-3 semitones higher than mine was, and I just couldn't sing it.
And then the next song he's doing, and the accent changes. He's singing from a lower part in his voice, and that voice is so gravelly that it fits the song.
Howlin' Wolf, probably the biggest, vocally, would probably be the biggest influence, at least in terms of me hearing stuff that I'd really like to be able to sing, and kind of, maybe I'm not coming anywhere near it, but it's in my head when I'm singing.
And he just becomes, for that song, the persona that it takes to carry that.
So when you're listening to him, he can make you cry. He's a storyteller. Every time he picks up the guitar, he tells another story, and he tells them in his unique way, with his unique voice.
If we take as a given the fact that I can sing it, or that a singer can sing it mechanically, it's got to be something you can get behind. The song's got to have some meaning for you. I mean, I can write a song that has 12 bars and change its chord just like a blues song would. And, it uses all the right notes and all of that, but I'll occasionally hear a new blues song now, and it's got something in it about, like my wireless router went down or whatever. That's like, I'm sorry, I can't get there. I can't get there. When you start talking about wireless routers and email and websites, then it's not blues anymore. I think writing blues is really, really difficult. And I find it particularly hard to write anything on the acoustic guitar. Because you're talking about being 50 years divorced from the cultural reality that spawned those styles. You know, some of what they used to call hillbilly music, which sort of grew into country and bluegrass music. You know, those guys very much used the guitar as an accompaniment. Because up to that point, if you were a guitar player, all you had to do was play the rhythm, and the fiddle player or the harp player or whatever was taking a solo, and if you were taking a solo, the banjo player was laying down a rhythm and that sort of thing, and it was very much more an ensemble approach. But then you got this thing called the blues, which was slower and deeper and more about a personal expression of emotion. So you get people developing, you know, more complicated, more complex right-hand technique in particular. You know, your thumb's like your rhythm guitar player, and your fingers are, they're the lead player, and it's all going on at one time. And if it's just you, you got to be playing a rhythm part, because if you stop, there's nothing going on at all. You know, then all of a sudden then you're a guy sitting on a chair with a guitar in his hands. You know.
There's a lot of people, they don't really look at him as a blues guy.
He's like a chameleon. He can nail all kinds of styles, and his when he does the Delta stuff, it's fantastic, right? He just plays it so legit. But you know, I've heard him go into little Celtic numbers. You know, sitting around his house drinking tea and stuff.
He knows reggae, he knows country, he knows rock stuff, Hendrix stuff.
It's more the fact that I had to be flexible early on. You know, that I had to play a little bit of everything. And now I'm doing the bluegrass thing with Julia Britton and her daughter Brenda Stone. They do a bunch of bluegrass stuff, they do a bunch of country stuff. None of it's blues, it's all other stuff. And it's just nice for me. It's nice to have a broader palette. But I mean, it's not the sort of stuff people would associate me with at all, which is even better. Right? I love that. I love doing something offbeat. I was in like a couple of the earliest punk bands in Newfoundland, you know, just because it was weird and different, and I wanted to be in the middle of it, you know. I was based out of Newfoundland until I was 34, but I spent a lot of time on the road. I think it's very heavily romanticized, and people tend to think of road work as being, you know, flying around like the Stones, you know, on some well-appointed Learjet. Well, I never did that. So I saw a lot of Canada and a lot of the U.S. from the back of a Dodge van at 4 o'clock in the morning with a PA speaker underneath me, you know, or trying to sleep in between guitars and mic stands.
Just hanging around in beat-up old trucks and driving from here to East Jesus and back for a gig.
And you're in another motel room that looks just like the last 15. And, you know, even if you were interested, the magic fingers into bed don't work anymore.
Crappy hotels and road food.
You know, I mean, that gets a little tired after a pretty short time. And then it just becomes, on one level, a job.
It's hard to make a living just doing music in Nova Scotia. We don't have that many people here. There's only so many places to play.
The musicians, they get as much as the market will bear, you know? And the market doesn't bear too high a price on a musician. So you know, to earn a living as a musician in Halifax is hard. You got to be a hustler. You got to really, really hustle.
The onstage part for me has never been a job. Not the onstage part. That's always been enjoyable and still continues to be enjoyable. I still love it. It's the 20 nights that you play, you know, that are good but not great, to get to that one night when everything is just, all the planets line up.
We think in terms of blues appeals to about 5% of the population. If you get a room full of that 5%.
And they feel that dynamic and they get involved in the emotional give and take that goes on in a blues performance, because it's really, really strong in a blues performance.
You've got a smoking room.
There's nothing I love better than being on stage and having it work.
Well, we're down to that last 2 minutes, so I'm gonna stop that now.
Okay, well, I'll sing and dance for a little.
All right, now we know how to finish the film. That's great.